I've been able to see ghosts ever since I was a little kid. I can't talk to them or touch them, I can only see them. On the 5th anniversary of our wedding, I spent the afternoon making a big dinner and setting the table while I waited for my husband, Nath, to get home. When I lifted my head, my blood ran cold. Nath's ghost was sitting in the corner of our living room. He was curled into himself, his skin pale and gray like all the life had drained out of him. His eyes never left mine. It felt like I had been dropped into freezing water. My hand shook as I grabbed my phone to call him, desperate to make sure he was okay. Before I could press his number, the front door opened. Nath walked inside like nothing was wrong and wrapped me in a gentle hug, just like he always did. Sorry, honey. Work kept me later than I expected. He held me close. I could hear his familiar heartbeat against my ear. It was steady, warm, and completely alive. I squeezed my eyes shut, telling myself over and over that he was alive. But when I opened them again, the ghost was still sitting in the same corner, staring at me without moving. A heavy feeling settled in my chest. If Nath was really dead, then who was the man standing here with his face, holding me in his arms? I searched every inch of his face. I'd been looking at that face for 20 years. From the time we were kids until the day we got married, he'd been beside me almost every day of my life. And now, right in front of me, another Nath, his ghost, was curled up in the corner of the room. My entire body began trembling. For what felt like forever, I couldn't force out a single word. Claire, what's wrong? He stepped closer and rested his hand against my forehead. Why are you sweating so much? Are you getting sick? His eyes were filled with worry, and the warmth of his hand made me jump. Startled, I stumbled backward. My sudden movement knocked over the glass sitting on the table. It shattered with a loud crash. Water splashed across the floor. Nath froze where he stood, both hands hanging awkwardly in the air. A flash of hurt crossed his face as he looked at me. Claire, what's wrong? I forced myself to stay calm. If the ghost in the corner was the real Nath, then who was this man? Whatever the truth was, I couldn't let him know what I was thinking. I took a slow breath and forced a smile. It's nothing, I said, trying to sound as relaxed as possible. Come on. Let's eat before everything gets cold. I sat down and picked up a pork rib with my fork. He filled a bowl with soup for me before reaching into the cabinet and pulling out a bottle of red wine. I got home late today, he said. Let me make it up to you. I stared at the dark red wine swirling inside the glass before speaking as casually as I could. Do you remember that time we secretly drank alcohol together? He paused for a second, then smiled. How could I ever forget? You were the one who insisted on trying it. I couldn't talk you out of it. 2 glasses later, you were completely passed out. The fork in my hand trembled. And then I threw up all over you. He laughed. You sure did. I carried you all the way home, and your mom smelled the alcohol. She thought I'd forced you to drink. He shook his head with a helpless smile. I couldn't exactly tell her it was your idea, so I just stood there and took the lecture. My heart tightened. Only Nath and I knew about that night. So, what were you wearing that day? I asked. A white shirt, he answered immediately. You ruined it. I spent forever trying to wash it clean. He smiled at me. Why are you asking about something so random? I lowered my eyes instead of answering. He remembered every detail. I glanced toward the corner again. The ghost hadn't moved. He was still watching me. My chest tightened once more. No. That still wasn't enough. I cleared my throat. Mom called today, I said, pretending to sound embarrassed. She said she's craving the beef stew I make. He placed another pork rib onto my plate. Okay. I'll cook it tomorrow and take some over to her. I looked up. You'll cook it? He laughed. Haven't I always been the one who makes it? He grinned. Remember when you tried learning? You almost burned the kitchen down. So I learned instead. The first time I made it, I burned my hands so badly I ended up with blisters. And you accidentally used salt instead of sugar. He chuckled. You made the funniest face after tasting it, but you still insisted it was delicious. I remember thinking my wife was unbelievably cute. You even lied to Mom and told her you'd made it yourself. He shook his head. After that, she kept bragging to all the neighbors about your cooking. I never had the heart to tell her the truth. Don't worry, he said, gently patting the back of my hand. I'll take care of it. I didn't answer. Everything he'd said was exactly right. Every memory matched perfectly. Yet the ghost was still there. Was I somehow imagining all of this? No. That couldn't be it. I've seen ghosts since I was a child. I'd never mistaken one before. After dinner, Nath tied on an apron and walked into the kitchen. I followed behind him and leaned against the doorway, quietly watching every move he made. The way he chopped vegetables. The way he handled the ingredients. How he measured the seasonings. Even the familiar way he sprinkled salt over the food. Everything was exactly the way he'd always done it. Soon the kitchen filled with the comforting smell I'd known for years. He turned and smiled. Go relax. It'll be ready in a minute. I stayed where I was. When he finally served the food, I took a bite. It tasted exactly the same. Well, he asked, leaning closer with bright, hopeful eyes. Is it good? I nodded. Yeah. It tastes just like it always has. He smiled with satisfaction before packing the leftover beef stew into containers and placing them in the refrigerator. Then he reached over and took my hand. It's been a long day, he said softly. Let's get some rest. I leaned into him. His body felt warm through his clothes, and I could hear his calm breathing beside me. Okay. I closed my eyes. Whether you are really Nath or something pretending to be him, I'm going to learn the truth. I followed him into our bedroom. The ghost silently came in after us. I quickly looked away, afraid to meet its eyes again. Nath straightened the bed and patted the pillow beside him. Come lie down. You've had a rough day. Get some sleep. I climbed into bed next to him. He reached over and switched off the main light, leaving only the small night light glowing beside us. Claire. He turned toward me. Has something been bothering you lately? No. I kept staring at the ceiling. I'm just tired from work. He gently took my hand. If you're exhausted, take some time off. I'll take care of you. His voice was soft, and the warmth of his hand almost made me believe everything was normal. My throat tightened. Out of the corner of my eye, I looked toward the lonely ghost still standing in the room. Do you remember this necklace? I picked it up from the nightstand. He smiled as soon as he saw it. Of course I do. I gave it to you on your 18th birthday. I saved my allowance for 2 months so I could buy it. The shop owner told me it was the last one in stock, and I was terrified somebody else would buy it first. My heart squeezed painfully. Every word was true. Do you remember what you wrote in the note that came with it? I asked. He smiled with a hint of embarrassment. This necklace is for you. Happy birthday. His cheeks turned slightly red. What I really wanted to write was, I like you, but I didn't have the courage. How did I answer you? I asked. You didn't. The next day you quietly slipped a box of chocolates into my desk. I was so happy I couldn't focus in class for the rest of the day. I slowly closed my eyes. Again. Every single detail was correct. He picked up the necklace and pointed to the tiny engraved words. Waiting for you. I even cut my finger while carving those letters. He held out his index finger. A faint scar was still there. Then why haven't you worn this necklace all these years? I asked, my voice barely steady. He looked at me gently. You told me you couldn't bring yourself to. You wanted to save it for our wedding day before you ever wore it. I quietly took a deep breath, set the necklace back on the nightstand, and lay down, trying my best to look relaxed. You really have an incredible memory, I said. You remember things that happened years ago. He smiled, reached over, and gently messed up my hair. How could I ever forget anything about you? I lowered my eyes. His answer was perfect, but it only made the ache in my chest worse. Everything he remembered was true. So why was that ghost still standing in the corner? I turned onto my side and looked at him. If your memory is really that good, I said, let me quiz you. I kept my eyes locked on his face. Do you remember when we went swimming as kids? He thought about it for a second before answering. Yeah. The pool was pretty deep. You tried jumping in without wearing a float, and you almost drowned. I pulled you out. He laughed softly. You were so reckless. I watched him carefully, afraid I'd miss even the smallest change in his expression. The story I'd just told him was a lie. I had been the one who almost drowned. He had saved me. If he agreed with my fake version, then I'd know something was wrong. Instead, he paused briefly, then reached over and lightly flicked my forehead. Are you dreaming or something? You were the one who nearly drowned. I dragged you out of the water. You swallowed so much water that you cried forever afterward. I opened my mouth. But I couldn't argue with him. Trying another test, I asked, do you remember the first time we went to the beach together? He looked at me with a puzzled expression. We've never been to the beach. Don't you remember? You've always talked about wanting to see the ocean. But we've never actually had the chance. A chill spread through my entire body. He was right. I'd never been to the beach. I'd only talked about wanting to go someday. I swallowed hard before trying again. When I was little, I had a white cat named Snowball. My voice sounded tighter now, almost desperate. He frowned. You never had a cat. When you were 12, one scratched you. Ever since then, you've been scared of cats. You avoid them whenever you can. I couldn't think of anything else to say. Every lie I invented. He corrected without hesitation. Get some sleep, he said gently. Stop filling your head with weird ideas. He pulled the blanket over us and wrapped his arms around me. You've been acting strange lately. I rested my head against his chest and listened to his heartbeat. I'm sorry, I whispered. He quietly hummed. It's okay. I closed my eyes. Like he always did, he rolled onto his side, slipped an arm around my waist, and pulled me close. Everything felt exactly the way it always had. Slowly, I opened my eyes again. Across the room, the ghost was still staring at me. My thoughts were a complete mess. Who was I supposed to believe? Several more days passed like that. I still couldn't figure anything out. The uncertainty weighed on me like a rock pressing against my chest. One morning, Nath stood in front of the mirror tying his tie. Without turning around, he caught my reflection. You didn't sleep well again last night, did you? Yeah. I rubbed my tired eyes. I kept dreaming all night. He finished buttoning his shirt, walked over, and sat beside me on the bed. Claire, there's something I need to tell you. What is it? I booked us a trip to the Maldives a while ago. I wanted it to be a surprise. He gently squeezed my hand. But something urgent came up at the lab, and I can't leave right now. I want you to go ahead. I'll meet you there in 3 days. I froze. He'd never been comfortable with me traveling that far alone before. Why now? I asked. He smiled and brushed my hair back. You've been exhausted lately. You deserve a chance to relax. I'll fly over as soon as I finish everything here. My heart skipped. This could finally give me the chance to learn the truth. I nodded. Okay. He immediately started packing my suitcase. I stood quietly in the doorway watching him. He took my favorite floral dress out of the closet, folded it carefully, then packed sunscreen, my sun hat, medicine, and even the eye mask I always used for sleeping. He packed every single thing one at a time. It's hot there, he reminded me. Bring more light clothes. And don't let the air conditioning get too cold at night. Cover yourself while you sleep. He kept talking while he packed. Your stomach acts up if you skip meals. I put crackers in your bag. If you get hungry, eat those. I watched him moving around the room. My eyes slowly filled with tears. He still remembered every little thing about me. Oh, and that book you wanted to read? I downloaded it onto your tablet. You can read it during the flight if you get bored. He smiled as he turned toward me. I looked down. The more thoughtful he was, the worse I felt for doubting him. Seeing me standing there without moving, Nath waved his hand in front of my face. Come on, he laughed. Quit daydreaming. He zipped the suitcase shut. I'll drive you to the airport. Then he took my hand and led me outside. As I stepped through the doorway, I glanced back. The ghost was still inside. It wasn't following us. I quietly let out the breath I'd been holding. Maybe. Maybe everything really had been in my imagination. Maybe something was wrong with my eyes after all. During the drive, Nath kept holding my hand while we chatted about random things. I stared out the window, my thoughts tangled together. When we reached the airport, he helped me check in before placing my boarding pass into my hand. "Call me as soon as you land, okay?" He hugged me tightly, resting his chin against my shoulder. "Have fun." I walked through security. Before disappearing inside, I looked back. He was still standing behind the glass wall, smiling and waving at me. My nose started to sting. He cared about me so much. And I'd spent all this time doubting him. I closed my eyes. This is the last time, I promised myself. I'm never going to question him again. On the plane, I intentionally chose a window seat. After takeoff, I looked outside. There was no ghost anywhere. The heavy weight inside my chest finally eased. When I got home, I'd schedule a full medical checkup. Maybe something really was wrong with me. Trying to ignore the lingering anxiety, I opened the book Nath had downloaded and began reading to distract myself. The moment I landed, I switched my phone back on and sent him a message. "Arrived safely. Don't worry." His reply came almost immediately. "Have fun. I'll be there soon." I smiled at the screen. The Maldives were every bit as beautiful as I'd imagined. Every day I sent him pictures of white beaches, colorful sunsets, and rows of palm trees. Every single time, he answered almost immediately. His messages were as warm and gentle as ever. One evening, during a video call, he was sitting on the couch under the soft yellow light in our living room. "So," he asked with a smile, "where did you go today?" "I went diving." I lay back on the bed in my hotel room. "When are you coming?" "It's lonely here without you." "Soon," he said with a grin. "Very soon. Besides, haven't you always dreamed of visiting the Maldives? Back in college, you used to say this was where you wanted to spend your honeymoon." His words caught me off guard. I'd said that only once, years ago. It had been such a casual comment that I'd almost forgotten it myself. "You still remember that?" I asked quietly. He smiled. "I already told you. How could I ever forget anything about you?" His eyes were full of warmth. My nose stung again. He stood up to pour himself a glass of water. As he walked away, the phone shook slightly in his hand. For just a split second, I saw a blurry figure standing in the hallway behind him. The ghost. It had appeared again. This time it wasn't looking at me. It was glaring at Nath with obvious hostility. I shot through my body. "Claire?" He returned holding a glass of water. "What's wrong?" "The signal's bad," I lied, forcing a smile. "I'm really tired. I think I'm going to go." As soon as we ended the call, my hands started shaking. I opened the airline app. The earliest flight home left in 3 hours. Before boarding the plane, I called Nath. The phone rang. But no one answered. My heart dropped. He had never ignored one of my calls before. By the time my plane landed, it was still early morning. The second I got off the plane, I rushed straight home. The house was completely dark. Nath wasn't there. Neither was the ghost. With shaking hands, I opened the location tracker we'd shared years ago for emergencies. The blue dot showed he was at the hospital. Without thinking, I ran. The hospital hallway seemed endless. Bright white lights flooded every corner, making everything feel cold and unreal. My sneakers squeaked against the polished floor with every step. The sharp, repetitive sound echoed through the silent corridor. The air smelled heavily of disinfectant mixed with something metallic, and it burned the back of my throat. I glanced down at my phone again. The small blue dot, the tracker Nath and I had shared years earlier just in case something ever happened, continued blinking steadily. It led farther down the hallway, past the regular patient rooms and toward a pair of heavy double doors marked restricted access. Below the warning were the words, "Cognitive Research Division." My chest rose and fell rapidly. The air suddenly felt too thin to breathe. I pushed through the doors. No one tried to stop me. The reception desk beyond them sat empty. A lone computer monitor displayed a blue screensaver that filled the room with an icy glow, stretching long shadows across the floor. The tracker stopped outside room 408. There was a small glass window in the door. I stood there frozen, my hand hovering over the metal handle. It was shaking so badly that my fingernails clicked against the steel. I forced myself to take one deep breath. Then I looked inside. The room was washed in the pale light of medical monitors. Thin clear tubes and countless wires wrapped around a hospital bed like tangled vines. And lying in that bed was Nath. He looked painfully thin. His cheeks had sunk in, and his skin had turned a pale grayish yellow beneath the fluorescent lights. The thick hair I knew so well had become dry, sparse, and lifeless. A ventilator mask covered his face. With every slow mechanical breath, the plastic fogged for a moment before clearing again. I recognized that face immediately. It was the same face I'd seen on the ghost sitting silently in the corner of our living room. My knees nearly gave out. I grabbed the doorframe to keep myself from collapsing. If this was really Nath. If this frail man struggling to stay alive was my husband. Then who had I been living with? Who packed my suitcase? Who held me every night? Who whispered that everything would be okay? Claire? A voice behind me made me jump. I spun around so fast my heart slammed against my ribs. Standing there was Dr. Harris. He'd supervised Nath at the neurological research lab where Nath had worked for the past 7 years. Harris looked like he hadn't slept in days. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes. His white lab coat was wrinkled, and coffee stains covered one sleeve. You. The word barely came out. My throat felt dry, and my voice sounded weak. What is this? Why is Nath here? What did you do to him? Dr. Harris let out a long, tired sigh. His eyes drifted toward room 408 before returning to me. You weren't supposed to come back from the Maldives for another 3 days, Claire. Nath worked very hard to make sure you wouldn't have to see this. See what? I grabbed the front of his lab coat. My voice cracked as panic took over. Who's at my house? Who's pretending to be my husband? Tell me. He gently pulled my hands away. Please. Come to my office. I'll explain everything. You deserve to know the truth, even though we hoped you'd never have to. His office was crowded with stacks of medical journals. Brain scans covered illuminated viewing panels along one wall. Several coffee mugs sat scattered around the room, each holding cold coffee that had long since been forgotten. Dr. Harris quietly shut the door behind us. The steady beeping of hospital monitors outside became muffled. He pulled out a chair for me. I didn't sit. My hands stayed clenched into tight fists. 3 months ago, Nath was diagnosed with an aggressive glioblastoma. It couldn't be operated on. Harris spoke calmly, but his voice sounded exhausted. He hid the diagnosis from you. He didn't want you to watch him slowly disappear. You know him. He's always tried to shield you from the worst parts of life. Instantly, memories flooded my mind. The swimming pool where he'd saved my life. The day he took the blame for the alcohol we'd stolen. Every time he'd stepped between me and something that might hurt me. He was also working on the synaptic transfer project, Harris continued. He pointed toward several complicated brain diagrams hanging on the wall. The project is highly classified. It's funded by private medical technology companies. The goal is to map every aspect of a person's consciousness. Their memories. Their personality. Their thinking patterns. Their neural pathways. Then transfer all of that into a biosynthetic neural network. He paused. A living, breathing duplicate created from the donor's own DNA. The room suddenly seemed to spin. A clone? I whispered. Harris slowly shook his head. Not exactly. An advanced biosynthetic construct. The technology is still experimental. Growing the body takes months inside a specialized incubation system. But the memory transfer can only happen during the final stage of the donor's cognitive decline. Nath volunteered. He knew he was dying. And he couldn't bear the thought of leaving you completely alone. So every night after work, he came here. He copied everything. Every memory. Every secret. Every habit. Every tiny detail of the love he felt for you. My chest tightened. So. The man who came home on our anniversary. Wasn't Nath. It was the construct, Harris answered quietly. We completed the transfer about a week ago. Right as Nath's brain began shutting down. The construct possesses all of Nath's memories. His personality. His emotions. The way he speaks. The way he loves you. As far as he's concerned. He truly believes he is Nath. He doesn't even understand that he's synthetic. He thinks he survived an accident at the lab. Tears finally spilled down my face. But why? Why lie to me? Dr. Harris's expression filled with sadness. Because the synthetic body won't last. The technology still has limitations. Without maintaining a quantum-entangled connection to the original brainstem, the construct's neural network slowly breaks apart. The real Nath has remained on life support here in room 408. It's the only thing keeping the construct stable. But Nath's body is shutting down. Tomorrow morning. We have to disconnect life support. The room became painfully quiet. The only sound left was the gentle hum of the air conditioner overhead. When the original Nath dies, Harris said softly, the construct waiting for you at home will begin losing its mind. Within 72 hours. His memories will collapse. He'll fall asleep. And he won't ever wake up again. I stood there staring at him. It felt impossible to breathe. The truth hit me all at once. Nath arranged the Maldives trip, Harris continued, because he wanted you on the other side of the world. He wanted you far away when his real body died. And he wanted the construct to disappear quietly afterward. Whether that meant simply shutting down. Or dying in what looked like an ordinary accident. He wanted your final memory of him to be happy. Healthy. Still loving you. He didn't want you to suffer through losing him twice. But you came back. I couldn't find a single word to say. I turned around and ran. I barely remember the drive home. Streetlights stretched into long silver and golden streaks through the tears filling my eyes. When I finally unlocked the front door, the house was dark and silent. The familiar scent of cedarwood and lavender drifted through the air. It smelled exactly like Nath. I slowly walked into the living room. The ghost was still there. He remained curled up in the same corner, but this time he wasn't staring blankly at the wall. His eyes were fixed on me. Pain covered his pale, translucent face, a grief so deep it was almost impossible to look at. Ever since I was a child, I'd believed ghosts were nothing more than leftover traces of a person's existence. They were silent remnants. Echoes that lingered in places they had loved or feared. They couldn't speak. They couldn't change anything. They simply remained. But as I looked at Nath's ghost, I realized I'd been wrong. This wasn't some empty echo. This was Nath. His soul had already separated from the dying body lying in that hospital room. Yet he couldn't move on. Part of him, his memories, his thoughts, everything that made him who he was still walking this world inside another body that wasn't truly his. Claire? A gentle voice pulled me out of my thoughts. I turned toward the hallway. There he was. The warm, living Nath. He was wearing his gray sweatpants and one of his soft t-shirts. He looked worn out. His eyes were slightly red from exhaustion. But the moment he saw me, his face brightened with the same smile that had melted my heart for years. Honey? You're home already? Why didn't you call me from the airport? Before I could answer, he hurried over and wrapped me in a hug. His embrace felt warm. His heartbeat was steady beneath my ear. Everything about him felt real. Everything felt exactly like the man I'd loved for 20 years. But over his shoulder, I saw the ghost stand up. Slowly, the real Nath spirit took a step toward us. He reached out. His hand stopped only inches from my back. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't touch me. His eyes were full of desperation. Without saying a single word, it felt as though he was begging me to understand. I'm here. I'm the one who loved you. I couldn't move. I stood trapped between two versions of the same man. One was flesh and blood, carrying Nath's memories but living on borrowed time. The other was Nath's soul itself, silently trapped because of one final desperate act of love. Claire. The Nath holding me pulled back just enough to look at my face. You're shaking. He gently cupped my cheeks. His thumbs brushed away the tears I hadn't realized were falling. What happened? Did something go wrong on the flight? I looked into his eyes. They were the same deep brown eyes I'd known since we were children. The warmth inside them was completely real. He had no idea what he truly was. He didn't know he was a copy. He didn't know his time was already running out. All he knew was that the woman he loved was crying. "Nothing," I whispered. My voice trembled despite my effort to stay calm. I forced myself to smile, though it felt painfully unnatural. I missed you. I couldn't enjoy the Maldives without you." Relief spread across his face. He smiled softly and pulled me into another hug. "I missed you too, Claire. So much." Behind him, the ghost slowly lowered his hand. There was no anger left on his face. Only exhaustion. A sadness so deep it seemed endless. He quietly sat back down against the wall, resting his head there while he watched us. He looked like someone who had already accepted a fate he couldn't escape. That night, sleep refused to come. I lay beside the living Nath with his arm wrapped comfortably around me. His breathing was slow and peaceful. Warmth radiated from his body. But across the room, beside the closet, the ghost sat silently on the floor. His knees were pulled tightly against his chest. For 20 years I'd hidden my ability from everyone. Even Nath had never known. I'd always been terrified people would think I was insane. Afraid someone would lock me away. I had never spoken about seeing the dead. And since ghosts had never spoken back, I'd simply watched them in silence. Tonight, the silence became unbearable. Carefully, I slipped out from beneath Nath's arm. I climbed out of bed as quietly as I could. Making sure I didn't wake him, I crossed the room. Then I sat down on the cold floor directly across from the ghost. He looked up at me. For the first time, surprise appeared on his face. His pale eyes widened. "I can see you," I whispered so quietly the words were almost soundless. "I've always been able to see ghosts. I've always been able to see you." His lips slowly parted. No voice came out. Instead, he reached toward me. His transparent fingers hovered just above my hand. A faint icy chill spread across my skin. It reminded me of standing beside an open window in the middle of winter. "Why, Nath?" My eyes filled with tears again. "Why didn't you tell me you were sick? Did you really believe leaving me with a machine with another version of yourself would hurt less?" The ghost turned toward the bed. His eyes rested on the sleeping construct. Then he looked back at me. Slowly. He placed a hand against his own chest. Next, he pointed at me. Finally, he pointed toward the sleeping Nath. He never spoke. He didn't need to. I understood. He loved me so deeply that he couldn't bear the thought of leaving me completely alone. He wanted part of himself to stay behind. Someone to hold me. Someone to comfort me. Someone who could keep me from returning to an empty, silent house. But that choice had trapped him. His soul couldn't leave this world because his memories were still alive inside the construct. Now he could only watch another version of himself live the life he'd been forced to leave behind. "I'm sorry." The words escaped through silent sobs. I buried my face in my hands. "I'm so sorry. I couldn't save you." Something cold lightly brushed across my hair. I looked up. The ghost had moved closer. He was kneeling in front of me. His transparent hand rested gently on my head. With the same familiar motion he'd used since we were children. He softly ruffled my hair. There wasn't a trace of anger in his face. No jealousy. No bitterness. Only kindness. Even trapped between life and death, he wasn't thinking about himself. He was worried about me. The next morning, the ringing of a phone shattered the silence. It was exactly 8 o'clock. The living Nath let out a sleepy groan before reaching over to the nightstand. He answered without opening his eyes completely. "Hello?" The moment I heard his voice, my heart nearly stopped. I already knew who was calling. It was the hospital. It had to be Dr. Harris. Nath listened quietly for several seconds. Little by little, all the color drained from his face. His fingers tightened around the phone. Then they began to tremble. I understand. Thank you, Dr. Harris. I'll come right away." He slowly lowered the phone. For several long seconds he simply sat on the edge of the bed with his head hanging low. Nath? I crawled closer and gently rested a hand on his back. What happened? He slowly turned toward me. His eyes were wide. There was fear in them. But even more than that, there was complete confusion. Claire. His voice trembled. Dr. Harris called. He said there was some kind of accident at the lab. He frowned, struggling to understand his own thoughts. He said my body. He suddenly shook his head. No. That doesn't make any sense. He said they had to shut the machines off. He grabbed both sides of his head and let out a painful groan. Why does my head hurt so much? Claire. Why can't I remember yesterday? I remember helping you pack. But after you left, everything's blank. It had started. At the exact moment the hospital disconnected the real Nath from life support, the bond between the original body and the construct began breaking apart. The invisible connection that had kept the construct stable was disappearing. Its mind was beginning to fail. Its memories slipped away one by one, like water escaping through tightly clenched fingers. It's okay, I whispered. I wrapped my arms around him and gently pulled his head against my chest. Don't force yourself to remember. Just breathe. He clung to me. Claire. I'm so cold. His voice shook. Why does everything feel so cold? I slowly lifted my eyes toward the bedroom doorway. The real Nath's spirit was standing there. He looked different now. The sick gray color had vanished. Instead, a soft golden warmth surrounded him. He looked peaceful. His eyes rested on the construct with quiet understanding. I knew what had happened. The hospital had already turned off the machines. The man lying in room 408 was gone. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Let's go for a walk, I whispered. Just the two of us. Like we used to. He looked at me with tired eyes. Okay. His voice sounded softer than usual. Almost younger. I'd like that. Together we walked to the neighborhood park. It was the same place where we'd spent countless afternoons as children. The same park where he'd confessed that he loved me beneath the enormous old oak tree. His steps had become slow. Uncertain. He still held my hand. But every minute his grip weakened a little more. From time to time he would stop walking altogether. He'd look around with confusion, as though the world itself had become unfamiliar. Finally, beneath the old oak tree, he stopped again. Claire. He looked around slowly. Where are we? We're at the park. I smiled through tears. The oak tree. Do you remember? He stared into its branches. The oak tree. His voice barely rose above a whisper. I remember a little girl. She was wearing a yellow dress. She fell off a swing. I gave her my ice cream so she'd stop crying. A laugh escaped through my tears. That was me. I was 8 years old. You gave me your chocolate ice cream. It melted all over my hands. A familiar smile appeared on his face. For just a moment. The Nath I'd always known was back. It melted. But you stopped crying. Then he looked down at his own hands. His skin had begun losing its healthy color. His fingers trembled slightly. Claire. I think I'm getting sleepy. I'm so tired. I know. I gently guided him toward the bench beneath the tree. We sat together. I wrapped my arms around him and let his head rest against my shoulder. You can sleep. I'm staying right here. You won't be alone. His voice was barely audible. You won't be lonely? I kissed the top of his head. Never. You've spent your whole life taking care of me. You've loved me more than anyone ever could. It's okay now. You don't have to keep carrying me. Slowly. He closed his eyes. Each breath became quieter than the last. Until finally. There was only silence. I looked up. A few feet away, standing beneath the sunlight filtering through the oak leaves, was Nath's spirit. He wasn't pale anymore. He wasn't sick. He looked exactly the way he had on our wedding day. Healthy. Happy. Full of life. He quietly reached one hand toward us. Beside me, the construct took one final gentle breath. Its body relaxed completely. Its head settled against my shoulder. The warmth slowly left his hand until only stillness remained. Then I saw it. A soft glow rose from the construct's chest. It shimmered like liquid sunlight. Slowly, it floated through the air. The light drifted toward Nath's spirit. He reached out and welcomed it into himself. The glowing light disappeared into his chest. At that instant, his eyes became brighter than I'd ever seen them. Everything had returned. Every memory. Every laugh. Every promise. Every piece of the love he'd poured into the construct. He was finally whole again. My husband took one slow step toward me. I knew he couldn't truly touch me. But he leaned forward anyway. When his forehead rested against mine, I felt warmth unlike anything I'd ever known. It wasn't the warmth of skin. It reached much deeper. It was something only the soul could feel. A love that even death couldn't erase. Then I heard his voice. Not with my ears. Inside my heart. Thank you. Thank you for seeing me. A tear rolled down my cheek. I'll always see you, Nath, I whispered into the quiet afternoon. He smiled. It was the same beautiful smile I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. A smile I knew I'd carry with me for the rest of my life. Slowly, his form began fading. Golden light surrounded him as his body dissolved into the afternoon sunshine. Little by little, he disappeared like mist carried away by a gentle breeze. I stayed on that park bench for a long time. The silent body of the construct rested beside me. I kept looking at the place where my husband's soul had finally found peace. The grief was still there. It was sharp. Heavy. Real. But for the first time in years, the cold emptiness inside my heart was gone. My fingers found the necklace resting against my chest. I gently touched the engraved words. Waiting for you. The metal felt cool against my skin. I wasn't afraid of the darkness anymore. Because I finally understood something. Real love doesn't end when life does. It stays. Even after everything else is gone.